Hello, Pirate Dave here. It's another new comic book day. It's June 17th, 2026. Let's get right into it with some comic books. And we're starting off with The Phantom versus the Red Dragons #1, but this is just going to be a one-shot. Mad Cave had produced a 5-issue Phantom series last year, but since then they've gone the route of releasing quarterly one-shots. A little bit bigger in size, but not by much, to be honest. So the first one shot they released was the Phantom versus the Skyband, and this one is the Phantom versus the Red Dragons. And the Skyband one shot felt a little bit truncated, like it was a story intended for a 5-issue miniseries. So I hope that this one was approached with a little bit more consideration to be paced and self-contained within the one book. I'm not super happy about that. I really do wish that we got more monthly Phantom issues, but hey, if all we get is quarterly one shots and they lean into the format and they know how to use it well, some Phantom books are better than no Phantom books, which is what we've been getting for years, right? This cover is by Alessio Zano, great artist. I love his work on I Heart Skull Crusher. This cover is pretty interesting. It's got a sort of digital art feel, very very circular geometry on the Phantom. To be honest, like, I think that his work for I Heart Skull Crusher was a little bit more, had a little bit more personality in it, but I am very glad to see such a talented artist doing the cover work for the Phantom. The interior artist is going to be Lin Yoshi, and the previous miniseries, as well as all these one-shots, is being written by Ray Fawkes, with colorist Wancho. I'm not super familiar with the Red Dragons, to be honest. The Red Dragon is a term that's popped up in the Phantom mythology a couple of times. There was a Red Dragon bar in one of the stories, but these are not associated with it. I think the Red Dragon are sort of a Chinese triad, sort of adjacent group, and you see a shot of the Phantom there. Very excited to dive into this one shot. Up next, we have Lobo #4, and I did get that Jason Momoa cover, although I'll be honest, I was hoping for the Simon Bisley cover with Supergirl in the foreground and Lobo in the background. It was a sick looking cover, but the LCS was all out of those, understandably so. It's such an awesome looking cover, and Simon Bisley, of course, is the original artist on the very first Lobo mini-series. Not when Lobo debuted in Omega Man, but what made Lobo who he is, the character that he is. But this is a great runner-up, of course. It's great to see Jason Momoa on the cover next to the man he was basically born to play in Lobo. And of course, DC always gives that main cover on the inside there. Oh man, this series has been harkening back to, like I said, that original Lobo miniseries style from 1990. Of course, it is very modern in many respects, but you are going to get some crazy panels, some crazy physiology and musculature, and you're going to get the little mutt guy there. They're really leaning into those more charming aspects of Lobo without denying us totally the over-the-top violence and action and explosions. Very much have been enjoying that series. Up next, we have G.I. Joe #23. This is the Energon Universe G.I. Joe. And you can see Mercer right there on the cover being attacked by some spirit animals. I was wondering who this guy was in the last issue that was controlling this sort of magic stuff. Magic's not something I'm super familiar with in the G.I. Joe universe. I guess he may be a character named Crystal Ball. And the other interesting thing about the story arc is it's very Risk forward. Risk is one of the original characters for this new Energon universe. He was not in the original G.I. Joe Real American Hero series. I do think he has been a pretty good addition. He's clearly got a story, a history of ironically, being Rick's assessment, of course, the appropriate story would be when he when it all went wrong. We got a little bit of a hint at that last issue, but I don't think it elaborated too much. Although we can infer basically the tragedy that must have occurred, even if it was just a result of him being not 100% correct, right? Up next, Redcoat number 18. And this made a comeback last month after a little bit of a break. You could see, and I'll spoil it because it's pretty obvious at this point. You can see Benedict Arnold right there on the cover. Albert Einstein in the bottom there. If you're not reading Redcoat, I don't know what you're doing. If you're not interested in the Ghost Machine unnamed universe that's going on, it's the biggest burgeoning, major comics event that's happening right now, especially in the indies, in my opinion, right? Of course, the big two will always have their thing going on, but even with like Reign of the Superboys, for example, for DC, I don't know. It feels like it's just going to be another series of getting you to pick up different series that you're not reading. While this is the Unnamed and Redcoat and Geiger, these are really telling a new story. And, classic story elements are there, but these are new characters. This is a new world. This is unexplored territory, You should be on it. That's all I'll say. You should be on it. Redcoat number 18. Up next, we have Babs, The Black Road South, number 4. And I'll admit, this has had a pretty inconsistent release schedule. Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows, I'm sure they're taking their time with this, which is probably appropriate, right? It is kind of their little passion project here. If you're unaware, Babs is sort of a satirical take on the fantasy genre. Of course, Babs herself is modeled after Red Sonja, but the book is generally very comedic, very vulgar, while taking sort of the danger of the situation seriously. People certainly do die. They certainly get into, mortal peril. And even though Babs herself is wielding a talking sword, that talking sword is not exactly a charming or always comedic character, although the premise of it is generally funny. And of course, the titular Black Road South is kind of it's kind of mimicking the Road to Mordor sort of aspect from the Lord of the Rings. This iteration of the series in particular has been very Lord of the Rings heavy. So if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, maybe you'll appreciate that, enjoy that too. Lastly, for the regular floppies, we have Vampirella number 3. This is Christopher Priest's Vampirella again. You have Priest's mainline Vampirella series, and you have Sniagoski's, I won't say secondary, but parallel series, which are taking place in different worlds. And Vampirella's Priest is reintroducing Draculina into the fold mostly. You can see this art is all harkening back to Ergun Gundez's art from 2019, and on most of the major series, of course, from the 666 era of the series as well. But this is actually David Goten, I think I'm pronouncing that right, David Goten, that's sort of implementing that style. You can see Victory is making an appearance. She's been gone for quite a while. Katie also has been gone from the story for quite a while, so we're really getting a return with Doc Cherry. You can see even Drago. Drago's been sort of out of the book for a couple of years, not for any major reason, just Christopher Priest has had different stories to tell, as well as a sort of year one origin story for Vampirella, which appropriately was titled Vampirella Year One. It's a very polarizing book. I'll admit to that. When I'm reading it, I don't come off thinking, oh, this is the best book of all time, or this is even really good stuff. But it is, for me, it's really creative stuff. And what Christopher Priest is doing is he's really doing his own thing. He's doing his own thing, and he's using Vampirella as this testing grounds for the way he can construct narratives and tie things together. And if you pay attention, he does tie things together. Everything he puts in panels, for the most part, you can bet that it'll come back in some way. It has been very fascinating in that regard. That being said, I'm not going to defend Christopher Priest's writing to anybody and say that it's great work or they're missing out on something special or anything like that. But I have been fascinated by what's going on. As you can see, we're also coming up on a good milestone. In about 10 months, we'll get issue number 700. I'll be honest, a lot of people are hoping Christopher Priest is not the one that will be writing that issue number 700. I'll also be honest, I don't know if Sniagowski's issues are being included in that. For our bonus books, we have 2 this week that I'm going to sort of showcase. Up first is ROM number 1. This is Energon Universe ROM, the return of ROM after I think the I think there was a user on League of Comic Geeks that was posting ROM every day, and it was something like 1,000 or 1,800 or something like that. In any case, this was a very interesting release because it was only available in the mask blind bags. I did not pull this out of the mask blind bags. I actually just bought it straight off of eBay. It was about $30, which, hey, you know, it is ridiculous for a single issue of a comic book, but I did want to read it. It is a nice matte foil cover. I actually did get a mask blind bag, but I got Mask Origins number 1 out of it. So now I have ROM number 1, and who knows, maybe it'll maintain that value as time goes on, so the investment might come back my way. Of course, I'm not a big comic book seller or anything like that, but you know, just in case you ever do, right? Take a look on the inside. And of course, this is being written by Robert Kirkman and Lorenzo De Felici, with colorist Matthias Lopez, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow's Matthias Lopez. If you like the color work in that, is an exceptional colorist. And we can see ROM right on that second page there. I'll be honest, the only part of the Energon universe I have really been following is G.I. Joe. So I don't know how much ROM has been referenced or hinted in Transformers or Void Rivals or anything like that. But we'll take a look at a couple of pages here. Get a good, this is a nice thick book. So I think this has probably a, oh, look at that poncho he's got. I like that. This is a nice thick book, so it's got a pretty big page count. And if you're interested, this praying, oh, look at this, these little guys. This praying mantis guy reminds me of Brack from Space Ghost. Lastly, a little bit of an indulgence for my own entertainment, my own interest. We have The Forbidden Harbor, published by NBM Graphic Novels. This is written by a husband and wife team, Teresa Radis and Stefano Turconi. They are Italian creators. They actually both worked for an Italian Disney magazine. Both of them wrote and illustrated comic strips featuring the Disney characters for that magazine. Forbidden Harbor here is a maritime tale set during the 1800s, I believe, the early 1800s. It dives into poetry as a narrative device a lot, as a theming device, narrative device. And it's all illustrated in pencil. Look at that. The lettering is more conventional, just to be clear, although there is pencil lettering as well. Whenever sea shanties are being sung, it's actually quite charming. But look at the detail that you're getting on this amazing pencil work. Just look at that boat. I always love I always love to see a good boat illustrated. There's just so much details you can get in there. And I just want to flip through most of these pages so you can get a sense of the depth that happens with Turconi's illustration here. I'll be honest, I do think that this was intended to be inked and colored at some point, although artists may be looking at some of these panels and say, no, there's no way that these were intended to be inked. I wouldn't know any better because they are shaded in a way that's like, okay, how are you going to ink that over that? But I don't know. Some of the panels in there describe colors and use it as like a sort of framing device for the shot, so to speak. So I don't know. I just think that there was, maybe they went back and forth on whether or not they would ink and color it. But the story itself features the main character who wakes up on a beach and is saved by a naval crew. This is not, there's no pirates in this. It's not a pirate crew, although there is some, some shady dealings going on at some point. But it's mostly just maritime stuff, naval stuff. He doesn't know his history. All he knows is his name. And as he's sailing with this crew back to England, it's discovered that he actually knows a lot about sailing. He's a very natural hand at it, so people obviously assume that he was shipwrecked as part of a crew, but he's wise beyond his years because he's only like a 14-year-old boy, right? So everybody's taken to him in some way, either charmed by him or they actually think he's maybe a curse and maybe he's gonna cause the boat to shipwreck because he's this phantom. It's quite an interesting mystery tale, but he's basically looked after by this captain who, as part of his story, he's looking after 3 daughters back in England whose father has turned traitor to the English crown and ran away with a bunch of gold, and now those daughters are destitute because their reputation is ruined. It's a fascinating like slice of maritime life, maritime tale, sort of social, social aristocracy. It's such an interesting thing. I can't say enough about it, but I really just, for all the good that it'll do, if this just gets 1 or 2 more pairs of eyes knowing about this book out there, that's all that I wanted to do at the end of my little haul video here. Hopefully that's interesting to you. I actually got this for like $5. That's how cheap these are going, and it's a fantastically bound book, very classically bound. You would think this is a novel looking at it on a shelf, and it is over 300 pages, so it is a substantial amount of content that you're getting. That's very, very well written, very well illustrated. Yes, it is in black and white and pencil, but I think at a certain point you'll understand that that's part of its charm, and you really wouldn't have it any other way. Color would ruin the haunting nature of the story, so to speak. That's it for me. Hopefully you had a great week too. I obviously had a great week with the comics that I picked up, and I will see you next time. Bye.